dead of night near Twin Butte, Alberta. The Marr family is restless. Suddenly, an eerie orange glow starts playing hide and seek with the shadows in the darkened bedroom. The gas plant is flaring. Little Matthew will continue screaming for hours, his body stiff and resistant to the comforting gestures of his mother. 100 or so kilometers to the east in Lethbridge lives a family that once called Pincher Creek home. Arling Body, now nearly 5, would have been dead long ago had the family remained there. At least that's what his doctor believes. As it is, his mother maintains a day and night vigil that means the difference between life and death for little Arling. She often sleeps with her clothes on, her head just inches away from the monitor that performs silent guard duty on Arling's vital signs. Should he stop breathing in his sleep, or should his heart rate start to fluctuate wildly, the monitor will awaken her instantly. St. Michael's Hospital is just 6 minutes away by car. Scenes like these reenactments have been repeated since the late 1950s in the Pincher Creek Twin Butte area of southern Alberta. The 2 gas plants operating in the area are highly visible and easy to blame, but over the years not one shred of evidence has surfaced to implicate them, to prove that there are things fleeting and elusive belching from their innards, to prove that fugitive emissions are making people sick. When Arling was younger, the monitor would shatter the night 20 or 30 times. Now he's not so bad, sleeping right through some nights. But if anyone visits from the gas plant area, he reacts to whatever is on their clothing. And he's done that in as little as 20 minutes. Both he and his mom also know that they'll be in for a rough night when the wind blows from the west. Dr. Jack Haberman of the Campbell Clinic in Lethbridge is familiar with the problem. He's Arling's personal physician and is currently looking after Jan Marr during her 3rd pregnancy. Nearly 3 years ago, he admitted that he and other doctors at the clinic were seeing a few more kids than normal with symptoms that overlapped Arling's. He was frankly puzzled, not knowing whether to put it down to coincidence, the environment, diet, or the people themselves. For example, he wondered if a family tie was resulting in a new syndrome with symptoms similar to apnea or crib death. There is a family tie between some, but not all of the people involved. When CFCN News first visited the area back in 1980, Arling and his cousin Sean Carpenter were both in St. Michael's Hospital. Sean, who still lives near Twin Butte, was being observed for symptoms similar to Arling's, in addition to those that translate more generally to other children and adults in the area. Persistent problems include headaches, stomach aches, runny noses and eyes, wheezy breathing, rashes, sore throats, diarrhea, extreme tiredness, sore or buzzing ears, swollen glands, constant coughs, high temperatures, and burning skin. Arling's problems represent an extreme reaction, an extreme sensitivity to things associated with natural gas. His doctor now thinks he may be reacting to the gas furnace in the family home, and the home is up for sale. A specially built house with solar, electrical, or hot water heat may provide an answer, but it's an expensive one, and Arling's medical needs are a constant drain on the family income.
Money-wise, it's hard to put a dollar on because it's taken every cent we've got to keep going right now. Where when we were living in Pincher, we could save, we had a good saving account, but every time we change houses, the interest rate's up. This is the first one we've owned in Lethbridge, but we're selling it. It's just taking every penny to keep going.
Do you get any help at all financially?
No help. No, it's do or die on our own.
As this program was being prepared, people in southern Alberta were getting a sniff of a sour gas well gone wild near Edmonton. The day before the smell hit the Lethbridge area, Arling started to react, his heart rate behaving like a yo-yo, his eyelids and fingernails blue, his ears bright red outside and purplish inside, his chest clogged. He stopped breathing several times overnight. Environment officials were firm in their comments that the gas wasn't strong enough to have an effect on humans. Charlene was 3 months pregnant with Arling when the Shell Waterton operation experienced a sour gas well blowout. She believes he could have been sensitized at that time. And Jan Marr and a few other mothers in the Twin Butte area believe their children could have been sensitized when the plant experienced a major line break in September 1979.
I also believe that there is a susceptibility, and that if you are susceptible, that it will bother you, and that if you're not, you're lucky. I think that, well, if I think of Matthew, he didn't really seem to have any problems until the line blew. And we were not evacuated. It just got so bad that we finally left, and we met a roadblock down the road that said, well, what are you still doing here? And we said, well, we're leaving. And they said, well, most people have already gone. And after that, when we got any kind of a smell or a flare, or there was a low cloud cover and or snow, especially in the winter, it seems like it's always in the winter, Matt would react, whereas before he really didn't seem to have problems. So I think the initial heavy dose is what got to him and now sets him off.
Jan married into the area. Her children are 5th generation on the land. She says she had no health problems before moving to Twin Butte and believes her second son Caleb is not affected as much because he was born out of the area. Now pregnant with her 3rd child, she's experiencing problems she terms peculiar, and the baby is extremely active. Her mother-in-law, Eleonora, is distressed that her grandchildren have to be raised in the area. What she sees happening now is like history repeating itself.
It's been around 25 years since we were first bothered with the pollution. Very extremely at first. The oil companies may say they have improved their operating procedures. That may be true, but the distress from the pollution is still great, and especially at night. One thing I notice more lately is that there are more flares going, which shouldn't go, and a lot of the extreme distress comes from those. The nights when the wind brings the gas over, it's really hard. You miss your sleep and you get up feeling that life isn't worth living in the morning. The nights when there isn't gas, we're normal and we don't even think of the plants.
Health problems in the Twin Butte area date back to the mid to late 50s. The countryside, easily some of the most beautiful in the world, was and still is dotted with sour gas wells. In 1957, British American Oil, now Gulf, built a sour gas processing plant in the neighborhood. And in the early 60s, the volume of sour gas was such that Shell Canada built yet another plant, just 3 kilometers from BA. Things started coming to a head in early 1963 with the formation of an Industrial Pollution Committee. It had the full blessing of the Municipal Council. Diaries were kept and symptoms logged. Reports were sent to the government, but it made no difference. The people were still sick, and as far as they could tell, nothing was being done to help them. In 1965, they turned to the courts. 15 families were involved in the $1.5 million action against both oil companies. It dragged on for 6 years and fostered feelings of hate that still makes it a touchy issue in the community. A good deal of the livelihood in Pincher Creek and area was based on those oil company salaries, and people were fearful the suit would force the plants to shut down. There was also infighting among the families involved, and when a $700,000 out-of-court settlement was offered, it looked to many like the best way out. At least half that settlement was gobbled up in costs. The rest was divided among the 15 families, depending on their property interest. In return, the people committed themselves to silence on the issue of pollution and blame. And that silence held until 1980, when the grandchildren of those involved began experiencing mysterious ailments. Dipping back again into the early 60s, another piece of the puzzle falls into place. The Department of Health was studying the problem and solicited the help of Julian Kaniski, who at the time was working for the Federal Ministry of Transport as a meteorologist. He spent some time in the area, and what he found frightened him. He reported to the Science Advisory Committee, and the very next day it was disbanded. A curt note to Kiniski said the committee was serving no useful purpose, services no longer required. The committee report termed the illnesses psychological.
Some of the things that particularly troubled me were the fact that there were cases of extremely high toxicity which had taken the lives of animals, excuse me, and birds, and nothing had really been done about this. We tried to get some pathology done, and we had strange things happening, like hog carcasses vanishing and so on. We had far too many cases of individuals who had lost consciousness when they were down in valleys and so on. We had far too much in the line of sickness of children, and it was the kind of sickness that was just not typical of a normal rural community. Technologically speaking, and this is the area that I was particularly critical of, is they were taking samples of various gases, and the locations of the sampling stations were mysteriously put in such places as to almost make sure that they wouldn't be involved with sampling the concentrations of gases, which were generally confined to the valleys when they were in high concentrations. And this was because of the general drainage that takes place in a valley, and because of the fact that, especially during the dark hours, you'd set up a rather strong atmospheric inversion which would have the tendency to contain these gases in these valleys.
Monitoring equipment in place today is still sniffing the air well above ground level and well away from low-lying areas. The plants are predominantly responsible for monitoring their own operations, but Alberta Environment's Air Quality Branch does spot checks. It also reviews data supplied by the plants, as does the staff at the Energy Resources Conservation Board, a body funded 50% by government and 50% by industry for its oil and gas operations. In 1980, emission guidelines for gas plants were violated more than 1,000 times. Not one reported violation was prosecuted. The monitoring stations are looking for the two most obvious gases, hydrogen sulfide and sulfur dioxide. Kiniski suggested more than 20 years ago that other things could be causing the problem.
But there are other things that are very suspect, and none of those things, to my knowledge, have ever really been pursued. And some of them are the fact that cyanogen, for example, is a gas which is not unusual in a sour gas stream, according to my reading, and the stuff can combine in such a way that you'll produce cyanides of various kinds, and these are, of course, extremely toxic. No work has been done in that area that I'm aware of. There's carbon disulfide, which is another very bad one, and I'm talking about things that have a real adverse impact on the central nervous system. And all of these things are quite plausible there, but nobody has ever verified that they are present or that they are not present.
CFCN News had its first meeting with the mothers in January 1980. They related the history leading up to the present-day problems and asked for help. Believing that simple publicity would not provide the answers they needed, it was decided to launch a research effort and see what turned up. It led straight to Kiniski, and he agreed to help. He went into the area covertly to check low-lying waterways using testing equipment purchased by CFCN News. He refused to go in without a gas mask, and fearing repercussions, insisted his involvement be kept secret. Adverse weather conditions prevented any scientific readings, and his efforts in late winter 1980 remained fruitless. Frustrated by the seeming lack of action and the lack of instant publicity, some of the mothers accused the reporter of having been bought off by the oil companies. Later, it was decided to get an independent analysis of water samples. Cyanide and selenium were added to the list of things normally tested for. Both turned up in varying concentrations in water from the Marr well, melted snow, and water that had been recycled through a humidifier for several weeks. The result begs the question, if cyanide could be found that easily, why hadn't it turned up in the myriad of water tests done by Shell, the Public Health Department, and Alberta Environment? And where did it come from? Chemical engineer Ed Jones had an answer for that. He studied the sour gas process and confirmed it was chemically possible to produce cyanide. Carryover from any process using amine holds the key.
The sulfur recovery furnace can convert the amine carryover from the amine plant to cyanides, and the conditions are exactly right.
What's the chemistry involved there?
Well, cyanides are formed by ethanol and ammonia at the same conditions and temperature and pressure that are existent in the sulfur furnace. And therefore there will be traces of cyanides more or less in some sour gas plants.
If a plant uses another kind of solvent, is there any other place in the stream where the amine process would be brought into use again?
Yes, if you have a tail gas cleanup unit of an amine type, and there are several, then there could be cyanides formed from amine carryover in that.
Well, I'm really excited about it for the simple reason that, as I've told you in the past, I was not sure how this was done because I could never have a look at any sort of a flow diagram. And now that I have talked to Ed and had a look at this, I'm delighted because, without a basic background in chemical engineering, this was just a suspicion that I've held over the years, and now all of a sudden I see that the suspicion did have some good grounds.
What kind of possibilities does it open up in your own mind?
Well, the possibilities now are that there certainly should be a concerted effort to chase this thing down and to show that this is happening or it is not happening, one or the other. Yeah, I don't think there's any room to argue about it anymore.
Shell Environment Coordinator Ken Dickey doesn't believe cyanide could be a byproduct of any part of his plant's operation.
Cyanides, I don't think, are very stable at high temperatures in the presence of excess oxygen. I'm not a chemist, but I'm led to believe that at high temperatures and excess oxygen levels, they readily decompose.
The cyanide molecule is a very strong bond, a triple bond, CN, and if they were so certain that it's not formed at all, perhaps they wouldn't object to testing for it.
I would think that we would already know if it were chemically possible.
Okay, the chemical formula is there. It is chemically possible.
Well, it's chemically possible in the atmosphere. The chemical formula is in the atmosphere to do the same thing. The conditions have to be right, and I don't believe they are inside of our process.
The Shell Waterton plant is tucked against the foothills of southern Alberta. Senior staff say its high visibility could be one reason for the chronic complaints. Manager Art Mathis can't understand what all the fuss is about.
In the early 70s, we launched a program to study what effect the plant operations had on the surrounding ranching farming community. And it was a 6-year program, and the bottom line was that we were not impacting on our farming ranching community. And since then, we have installed the Scott plant, which has increased the recovery from 96 up to 98.7. That was the requirement. Our actual operation, first half of this year, is 99.6. No one else can equal that.
You have some observations about your own employees as well.
Well, our own employees have one of the best attendance records from a sickness absenteeism point of view, and really there's no indication that there is a health problem in the gas plant looking at our own employees.
Mathis says he himself would like to live on an acreage near the plant, but that he can't afford the high land prices. The Scott plant to which he refers was installed in February 1976 at a cost of $21 million. It takes the plant's waste gas and, using an amine process, draws off even more hydrogen sulfide for return to the main plant for reprocess. Developed by Shell researchers, the technique in 1979 won the Chemical Institute of Canada's Environmental Improvement Award. So why all the complaints? Ken Dickey is on the front lines.
At times you get a little frustrated with the number of complaints you get, and I guess the main thing is we feel we're doing a good job, and our environmental plants that we have here for the protection of the environment are as good as you'll find anywhere in the world.
When asked about comments from residents that they had never seen Shell's emergency evacuation plan, Dickey expressed surprise. He produced a sheet dated June 1980, outlining some of the simple steps to follow, and indicated he would have to get out more and talk to the people. Most times when he goes out, he's responding to a complaint.
I haven't been out to visit anybody that's very obviously sick.
You believe that?
I don't think anybody has ever told me they were very sick when I was visiting. Not feeling well, upset, yes, but never sick.
I know of one particular instance in the last few weeks where you went. You visited Eleanor Marr. She's been very, very ill. Apparently you were burning some raw sulfur, and you said you'd do it during the day rather than at night.
We were pouring sulfur.
Yeah. And did you change your time schedule because she said she was feeling ill?
We have changed our sulfur pouring so that we can more closely monitor it. We don't know for sure that that's what was bothering Eleanor, but we're now going to pour sulfur only during the day shift, and we have more time and people to monitor it.
And so you are willing to compromise your operation if you feel that you are interfering with somebody?
Certainly, we've always told people that in any way that we could cooperate, we were more than willing to cooperate.
Dickey says he wouldn't keep his own wife and family in the area if he thought they were being harmed, and study after study over the last 20 years would seem to support his position. One study done in 1978 looks to be a study of studies. It lists no less than 100 compiled from around the world on the effects of hydrogen sulfide and sulfur dioxide. Underway right now is a study of stack gas emissions commissioned by the Conservation Board. An independent group from the University of Windsor is sampling emissions from 6 different gas plants this year, including Shell Waterton. The eventual cost, when 6 more stacks are studied next year, $250,000. Conservation Board Chairman Vern Millard says the group is looking for the presence of 29 heavy metals, something that hasn't been done before.
We quite frankly doubt if there are trace elements being emitted. The board's chemical laboratory conducted some tests a few years ago on mercury emissions, and they found nothing to support the allegations that were made at that time. It may well be the case as a result of this particular program. But from our point of view, we wanted to make sure that our general belief was validated.
The suggestion that stack emissions be studied came out of the Quirk Creek Jumping Pound hearings. Using the cyanide theory, Jones at that time pushed to have it included in any study done on stacks. The board's report on those hearings dismisses the contention, saying it was unable to withstand scientific scrutiny. Jones is highly critical of the emissions study now underway because it doesn't look for trace elements anywhere else in the process. There's another person who doesn't think the study is going far enough either. He's Dr. Earl Snyder, a University of Alberta sociologist, and he thinks flare stacks should be studied along with the downwind effect. He bases that belief on early results of a $75,000 study he is doing for social services and community health. His proposal was selected over one from the Canadian Public Health Association. Theirs had a $200,000 price tag. But the present-day version of the Industrial Pollution Committee thought it was much better than Snyder's. His, the committee said, constitutes a gross pseudo-intellectual assault upon a group of country people. After years of providing water samples, soil samples, blood samples, urine samples, and stool samples, the people's reaction was understandably bad, particularly when it came to Snyder's request for hair samples. Families living within a certain proximity to the plants were computer-selected to participate. 93% did, along with 43 volunteers. Conspicuous by their absence was the group of people who had been complaining the loudest over the last 3 years. But even without them, Dr. Snyder found results that put some members of the community in a position that surprised them.
There's no doubt that in Twin Butte, the area that the health problems are being reported, there is what could be a gas plant effect. There is information which suggests the gas plants are implicated. And what I'm doing now, of course, is trying to resolve that, to determine the extent to which it is the gas plant.
Okay, you met with the people that were included both in the computer-selected sample and the volunteer group.
Correct.
What did you tell them?
Well, we had a very lengthy meeting. I first of all took a lot of time to explain them what their individual reports were all about, and they were extremely interested in that. I also gave them some findings from the study. They were the first ones to hear it. The people down there are my first responsibility. And third, I told them what would happen now, the kinds of confirming tests that are underway, that will be underway shortly actually, to help me in the analysis of the information.
One of the things you used in your testing was hair samples. What did you find in the hair samples?
Well, there were 21 elements that we were looking for, including essential elements and toxic metals. And in those tests, I did find some essential elements and toxic metals that were higher in Twin Butte than they were in any of the other places that were studied. That's the area east of Claresholm and the area west of Cardston.
Symptoms generalized to his computer sample include hearing difficulties, skin rashes, dry cough, breathing trouble, sore, burning noses, hurting all over, loss of sense of smell, and a complaint of being easily distracted. Snyder's full report will no doubt be a focal point at the Conservation Board health inquiry to be held in the Pincher Creek area sometime in 1983. Alberta Environment has a staff of over 1,200 and a budget of just under $300 million a year. More than half of that, $160 million, is channeled into environment protection. It has a staff of just over 300. The Chief of Air Quality Control is Jerry Lack.
Within the department, the way we're organized, there's a particular group that sets up the standards and the regulations and issues the licenses and determines what the emission rate would be. Now, the group that I'm with, in fact, is responsible for the monitoring. And I know for our group, I think I can speak for the other group as well, we do what we believe to be the very best for the people of Alberta.
Lack is also totally satisfied with the technological expertise that is his to draw upon.
Right now, in fact, we do have a new mobile unit which we've purchased, and one of the things we'll be equipped with is a gas chromatograph, which will give us the ability to break down to a greater extent than we can right now the various components that are present as far as the air pollutants. And I think this will help us somewhat from what we're doing right now.
Yeah, you're kind of on the front line with these problems. Do you have adequate backup with labs, with technology?
We have a very good lab, of course, in Vegreville, which does a lot of the analysis for us. And to date, they haven't let us down or turned us away.
Do you kind of have to be a detective and sort out an element or compound that you're looking for and then ask them if they can find it? Or do they have the capability of looking at a sample and breaking it down as to what's in it?
I guess the best way to answer that is that, in fact, it is a two-way street, of course. They'd very much prefer it if we would take a sample to them and say, here's what we're going for. Although there is the capability at the center that you take a sample to them. And to a degree, they can, in fact, give you a breakdown. The difficulty is that you have to sample by a certain methodology in order to get a particular compound. And of course, if you sample with the improper methodology, although it may be present, when they look for it, it may not be there. So it's best if we know what we're going for and have them do the sampling on that.
The Alberta Environmental Centre at Vegreville is the multi-million-dollar brainchild of the Lougheed government. The money was approved in 1974, construction began in 1977, and it was opened officially in June 1981. Its purpose, according to the man who designed and built it, is to do the technical detective work required by the various government departments it serves. Dr. Sherman Weaver has been with the Alberta government since 1971. His expertise is in the area of nuclear physics.
First, I put together the programs. That is, I went around and talked to all the various government departments that had an interest in the environment and asked them what they wanted done, what sort of work they wanted done in the scientific field. After I had a good idea of what was to be done, then I decided how it should be done. And from that, I got into design of a building to carry out that particular work.
What purposes did you find when necessary?
Well, we have basically three functions here, and these seem to fall out of the programming work I did initially. We provide service, either diagnostic or analytical service, to the various departments. We provide applied research, which is necessary to solve specific problems they have. And we develop some things to the technology stage, such as developing a better mousetrap.
Working with a budget that this year totals over $11 million, the Center does investigative work involving plant and animal sciences. With regard to the environment, it takes a problem-solving and even preventive approach. For example, it does the once-a-month testing required on drinking water supplies from around the province. Samples from rivers, lakes, municipal water supplies, sewage treatment plants, and industrial effluents are analyzed for up to 67 water quality factors. In addition, the center has the advanced technology to carbon date groundwater. That's an advantage to municipalities seeking new sources of water supply. By carbon dating, the center can advise as to whether water is from a new source or one that might run out. One study just getting underway at Vegreville will determine the long-term low-level effects of many of the sulfur gases associated with gas plants.
We have requests from the occupational health people in the Department of Workers' Health, Safety and Compensation to look at the present standards for exposure of workers in gas plants and to see if they're safe enough for workers' health. And in order to do that, we have to generate the gases and expose and carry out experiments on various levels of exposure over a much longer period of time, perhaps, than is customary in this business.
So you're not looking at heavy doses, you're looking at a long-term.
That's right. The easy thing to do is to determine what is called an acute exposure or an acute effect. That is an exposure which produces an effect on something almost immediately. The very difficult work in which we're trying to get started is the chronic effects, and that is the 8-hour day or the 8-hour day for 30 days a month for years sort of thing, and what level is that safe? And that's not very well known at the moment in many areas.
Considering the length of time sour gas plants have been in operation in this province, one wonders why a study of this nature is just now getting underway, and why is one being conducted at all? And why doesn't the Vegreville Center have a TAGA monitor? The Trace Atmospheric Gas Analyzer is the most sophisticated piece of equipment available today. It operates at atmospheric pressure and is thus extremely adaptable to mobile units. It also measures escaping or fugitive emissions in real time at the instant it detects something. That allows for much quicker investigation of the source of a contaminant and a faster means of stopping the problem. Dr. Weaver relies on departmental requests for special pieces of equipment, and so far he's not convinced he needs a TAGA. Such a request would have to come from people like Jerry Lack in air quality. He hired a mobile TAGA to do work in the Pincher Creek area about a year ago, but he's got some concern about interpreting the results. That is, he questions what they really mean. He realizes the unit's potential, but still has some reservation.
Of course, the ultimate in technology, but also there's a lot of questionable I think data which comes out of it would in fact be the trace atmospheric gas analyzer. But it's almost in the early stages right now. And my own personal feeling is that it may be just a little bit too early for us.
Vegreville's most advanced piece of equipment in this area is a gas chromatograph mass spectrometer. But is it good enough to do the precise analysis necessary to find fugitive emissions? The man who works with the TAGA owned by the Defense Research Establishment at Suffield thinks not. Dr. Ridley Shaw is also a member of the Environment Council of Alberta's Pollution Study Group.
They're measuring, one might say, the ones that are very easy to determine, and the ones that their mandate dictate that they measure. I have a different mandate. I am looking for everything. I am looking for them in the smallest quantities, and as a result, I need a different generation of equipment, which is what we have here.
Are you suggesting that their mandate should be expanded?
Definitely. This has been an ongoing undertaking of the Environment Council of Alberta to get Environment Alberta to upgrade all of their technical abilities, but when you start talking in that particular manner, you then are really talking about changing the regulations, which do require changing in this province. And as I have stated on many occasions before, you can't solve the problems of the 20th century with the technology of the 19th century. And to a point, this statement does apply.
Now, the technology that you use has a particular capability. Could you explain that, please?
The technology that we have takes advantage of the probably what you could refer to as the most sophisticated type of detection equipment used in the laboratories, that is mass spectrometers. Mass spectrometers for years have had very high sensitivity. But the difficulty has been in the area of biology to take advantage of this capability is to prepare the samples in such a way that the mass spectrometer can cope with it. That is why the instrument we have is 3 mass spectrometers hooked up one behind each other. To use the jargon on the lab, instead of separating our mixtures using gas chromatography and liquid chromatography, we use a mass spectrometer. There are some limitations to this approach, but in the area of the environment, it has already proven itself as to be a very valuable piece of equipment and has given information which was not obtainable in any other way.
From what I understand, you don't have to know what you're looking for with that particular machine.
You don't. That is quite correct. The machine can be programmed and operated by computer, that you simply say, machine, go and find out what it is, and it goes ahead and does it.
More than 20 years of investigation into the Pincher Creek area health problems have produced nothing, and that kind of a track record does not bode well for the people that own this house near Red Cliff. 8 years ago, it became the retirement haven for Everett and Vi Peterson. For the last 2 or more years, it's been like hell on earth. In May of 1981, they walked out, and today it looks just as it did when they left. Today, Everett and Vi continue living in an 11.5-foot self-propelled unit. They can't live in their house because they get sick. They tried living on their property inside the camper, and they still got sick. So after spending last winter in a rented house and the summer at campgrounds in the vicinity, the Petersons' camper is parked outside their daughter's house in Medicine Hat. There's been snow already, and they're not sure what they'll do when the cold comes. Meanwhile, they continue to pay all costs connected with ownership of their abandoned home.
The first thing that bothers me is my ears. My ears will get to ringing. The one ear will start within a few minutes. And we have been subjected to stay there for 2-3 hours on several tests that they wanted to run. And within 3 hours, both my ears are ringing, my tonsils will pulsate, and they did that for blood tests, which proved nothing. But then in the evening, my throat will swell right shut. If I spend that much time in the house, 3 hours, my throat will swell right shut, and the bed will be completely soaking wet from my sweat at 10, 11 o'clock at night on that same day. And my lungs will fill up with a white foamy substance which takes 4 or 5 days to get rid of them symptoms.
Everett wants to get mad, but he doesn't know whom to get mad at. The Medicine Hat Health Unit has been helping since the beginning, but some strange things have been happening to inhibit the investigation. Things like blood samples getting broken on the way to the lab for analysis. Health Unit Director Dr. Ken Clementi says there's no doubt Peterson gets sick, and Vi to a lesser extent. The blood sample that did get analyzed showed a lower level of cholinesterase than normal, and a low count is consistent with pesticide poisoning. And it's a pesticide, the propoxur used to kill adult mosquitoes, that is suspect. Noting the similarity in symptoms demonstrated by the Petersons and those associated with Baygon poisoning, a reporter from the Medicine Hat News convinced the health unit to sample for it. Suspect water from a slough adjacent to the Peterson residence was sent to Dr. Joseph Cummins, a geneticist in the Plant Sciences Department of the University of Western Ontario in London. Everett used water from the slough, located just down from the CP rail right-of-way, to water his plants and irrigate his yard. Cummins was chosen because he has been on a cross-country crusade concerning the cancer-causing dangers of using Baygon in urban areas, and his lab was set up to test for it. Vegreville wasn't, and time was of the essence. All samples sent to Cummins came back positive. Baygon was indeed present.
He had a great aversion to this particular shirt, and I was absolutely shocked to find that this aversion to the shirt was consistent with what seemed to be an elevated level of Baygon on it, whereas the other items of clothing, which she had no aversion to, indeed had little or no Baygon on it. So at least in the samples that we studied, there was a good indication that Bagon was on these samples. There's no question of it.
At this point, we tried to find out where the Bagon could have come from, because the quantity found by Dr. Cummings in the water, given its half-life, was such that a very considerable amount of this pesticide must have been dumped into this slough. And who could have done it? And this is something that has never come to light. The amount of Bagon in the mosquito spray, which wasn't done particularly near there anyway, was far too small for this. So that exonerates the spray program.
The working hypothesis I might make if I were a detective would be that we had a case of midnight dumping there, and there was a mixture of things being dumped.
Dr. Cummins' lab did not get a sample of water collected eventually by federal and provincial officials, and the time that passed between the date the original sample was taken, September 1981, and when official samples were taken, November 1981, accounts for the fact that both federal and provincial labs found nothing.
This was a very unsatisfactory business, and it raised suspicions in my mind, I must admit. Whether they're justified or not, I don't know, but until we find out why Dr. Reed never sent the samples on to Dr. Cummings, I shall remain suspicious.
The 15-family lawsuit in the mid-60s could have established a legal precedent had it not been settled out of court. Although a win looked likely, it would have left the entire petroleum industry wide open to further suit. Chaos would have resulted, and settlement was seen as the most prudent answer. News stories dating back to 1958 indicate government and industry stood firm in their belief that the processing plants were not and could not be creating a nuisance or affecting human health. After all, if this was possible, they would not have been built. But even back in the early 70s, worldwide public opinion was beginning to deal harshly with industries creating environmental problems. And even then, industries were realizing they were merely instruments of society, entrusted to a role only as long as they behaved themselves. To the 15 families, settlement seemed second best to victory. But they did establish that although it might not be the wisest action to shut down an offending industry, that industry must be prepared to make restitution for damages caused by air pollution. They were able to do that because the isolated nature of their community allowed them to provide proof of harm, the key to victory in any pollution case. And that, according to an environmental law expert at the University of New Brunswick, is what is wrong with the traditional legal approach to dealing with pollution matters. Professor Hayo Versteeg.
In a risk context, lack of proof of harm tells us nothing, one way or the other, about the innocence or the safety of the risk activity. It may be that somewhere in the future we'll be able to establish that the activity was safe. It might also be that somewhere in the future, we will establish that the activity was dangerous. Now, when our goal is to protect individual rights, individual liberties, we can rationalize the response of the state in that maxim, better that 100 guilty people be declared innocent than one innocent person be declared guilty. However, when the goal is to protect public health, do we really want to say that it's better that 100 harmful chemicals be declared safe than one safe chemical be declared harmful? Simply stated, that concept, that proposition is absurd. We have to therefore break out of that proof of harm concept completely, and we have to devise a process which balances off competing interests, which balances off the risks and the benefits.
This program raises some important questions that demand answers from those that govern us and look out for our best interests. If our technology is so good, for instance, why after more than 20 years has nothing substantive been found to pinpoint the cause of health problems in the Twin Butte area? Why were suggestions made more than 20 years ago ignored? Suggestions that something other than hydrogen sulfide and sulfur dioxide was involved. Why is the province just now getting down to studying the long-term low-level effects of hydrogen sulfide and sulfur dioxide? Why is the Conservation Board just now studying stack emissions? Why aren't they looking for cyanide? Why did Environment fail to prosecute reported violations of gas plant emission guidelines in 1980? Are the guidelines good enough? Is the Conservation Board being compromised by its 50-50 funding split between industry and government on oil and gas matters? Why did federal and provincial officials wait so long to sample the Peterson Slough? Why was Vegreville unable to test the first water sample? Why didn't Dr. Cummins receive some of the official sample? Why isn't government leading the fight to help citizens overcome legal odds top-heavy in favor of industry? Meanwhile, what can the people do? The newly formed Environmental Law Center in Edmonton is a first step toward helping people to help themselves. It was founded by lawyer Linda Duncan in March 1982, with funding provided by the Law Foundation. Its purpose is threefold: to research environmental laws and suggest improvements, to educate people as to their environmental legal rights and demystify the court process, to teach people how to stand up and argue their own cases, or in some instances represent individuals or groups where important areas of public interest are involved. The center has agreed to help the Petersons, but what do they do in the meantime? Are they entitled to compensation to help them cope with expenses incurred through no fault of their own? As Everett says, we're not greedy pigs, we just want a place to live. The bodies are in danger of losing their home. Arling's medical costs have been astronomical, sapping what little income there is now that the rigs aren't working. His dad's current job is in a junkyard at $1,200 a month. That doesn't even meet their current mortgage payment and is certainly not enough to qualify for another when this one comes due in a matter of months. And as for Jan Marr, she wonders why she should have to move to get away from a problem that affects her children's health. Move from an area that's been in the same family for 5 generations.
Money-wise, I'm not interested in money, but I am interested in the health of people and the awareness of people. And if they can find something that is causing the problem and fix that, then I would be compensated happily. I really would be.